All right, click the links to join the channel here over at Subscribestar. I got a mailbox. Want to mail me some comics? So how it started and where it's going. First of all this is a ship. This ship has sailed about trying to save comics, but that's how it started. Is Mark Millar was talking to a comic retailer about what's not working, and as I often say, the feminist diverse cancer doesn't connect with an audience. And okay, maybe I could say it in a nicer way, but that's the reality on the ground. And I'm sure the retailer and Mark Millar are having this conversation about much more polite things about the covers and what's not selling. It doesn't matter. The ship has sailed. They destroyed the industry like 10 years ago, and it's a generational thing. And the infrastructure involved, it would require everyone involved in it having a come to Jesus moment, and that's just not going to happen. They comics to them, the only point of comics is a vector for Bolshevik propaganda. So there's no saving comics. If you're in the retail industry, switch over to board games and manga. When one manga outsells the entire American comic industry, it's like, yeah, okay, you might as well start switching over and packing it in. It's hey, Mark Waid, how did Ignited do? It's a Arizona comic about the Second Amendment, where Arizona now is like 75% Latin, as well as California and Nevada. It's like it's indistinguishable from south of the border. And in his comic, it's all red-haired and blonde-haired people who are trying to uphold the Second Amendment, and all these little POC kids are, I don't know, trying to like take people's civil rights away. It's bizarre. It's a glimpse into the mind of people like Mark Waid and Ta-Nehisi Coates about what they would do when they have powers. Well, they would immediately take your rights away because they know what you need better than you know what you need. I don't think that comic, I don't know if it was supposed to go 10 issues. I don't think it went to completion. It was so bad. I mean, by the end of it, it's probably selling like Mags Visaggio territory. Anyway, so Mark Millar is talking to a retailer. Again, the ship has sailed. They just switch over about comics. And it's like, okay, great. I mean, the worse the mainstream gets, the better it is for people like EVS and Comicsgate and all those kind of guys. And Mark Waid is not playing with a full deck. And before you think that's just me saying that, there's an interview he did with Word Balloon about 2 years ago. You could probably search his YouTube channel. And which is weird because he's a channel that gets access to everybody in the industry, which, he's a left to center guy. They're all left to center. But he's only got like 5,000 subs. And you're like, you have access to everybody. You're doing these really kind of boring interviews. Like he did an interview where the only two people in the audience were Nerdette, I think Newsstand, and me. And I swear to God, this happened. It's so friggin' funny. There's somebody who was being interviewed. I don't even remember who it was. Somebody in the industry, and she goes, "Oh, did you buy this guy's comic or graphic novel or something?" I go, "Oh no, because he blocked me on social media. Maybe it was Ron Mars or something." And that just sat there in the live stream. And like I didn't bring it up. She brought it up, and it's just sat there because we were the only two people in the live stream. It's like, yeah, you guys block people on social media. How well is that working out for the mainstream industry? Like I said, it's dead. If you want to sell comics, there's nothing better than owning your own IP. That's called Comicsgate. That's a network on social media. Anyway, so Mark Millar is talking to people, talking to retailers, and as if like they could turn it around. No, that's not going to happen. And Mark Waid later on in this goes, he would rather burn the industry down than see the alt-right have any control of the industry whatsoever. And he considers the alt-right Comicsgate. And you look at like EVS and Richard Meyer and Malin and Mark, who's that Asian guy, that fat Asian. I'm talking about like people like loosely associated with it. And you look at them and you're like, where are they? And you realize in Wade's mind, the right is anyone to the right of him. Okay, so what happened is comic writer Mark Waid accuses Mark Millar of attacking Gail Simone. He's written a bunch of crap. I don't know if anything's selling too much now, because to be fair, I don't know if anything across the board is selling. Okay, so Millar, I hate saying that. It just does not roll off the tongue. What's his name? Well, there's two Marks. I can't really call him by his first name. Noticed some cancel pigs saying, "I stood up for retailer to promote my books. I give away every cent." I guess he's independently wealthy off of prior stuff. So I guess he assigns all his interests to the artists. Since I sold the company and literally just do the books for fun, I stood up for the retailer because it was the right thing to do. And that his interview is on his channel. So it doesn't matter how many books they sell, they're getting all of it. But they're furious, somebody calling out their cruelties and desperate to hang on to their little sport. Yeah, they would, as Richard Meyer said years ago, it's like they would rather rule over the ashes than rule over and then be servants in a successful industry and have to write comics that appeal to everyone. They believe they're refining the audience by shrinking it and getting rid of the Hugo Boss Roman saluting crowd, which is 90% of their audience, which is why their comics shrink and shrink. So then he says, and this is where the confusion started, because you're dealing with a group of mentally ill people. Mark Waid is a great example, and there's no shortage of. I did a video years ago where I was, oh God, allegedly he went to some comic book store and he's like knocking over shelves and losing his mind, and I did a video on that. It's from this, and actually, thing is, it was a black woman who owned the store, and that's why it kind of got traction, because Mark Waid is, he also has a quote about talking about holding up POCs on his mighty strong shoulders, and you look at Mark Waid and you're like, what world are you living in? Where like you didn't have friends as a kid, like, and I say that because he's the kind of guy who talks like he never had somebody give him looks. And I'm not talking about like some people hear that and they go, oh, just some macho BS about punching people out. All it takes is looks from friends and family. It's like when you say something stupid, somebody gives you a look and you're like, and you learn from it. It takes years, and that's part of growing up. And occasionally happens into adulthood. So this is where the confusion starts. Millar says there's a really interesting book being written about this tiny network terrorizing pros the past few years, and I think it's going to really blow up. That's a lot of hot words. When they're exposed, I think a fantastic documentary on it would be like a dose of salts to the industry. So Mark Waid got incensed about that because he thought the book was, let me skip down to this, Penny Parker, who writes for Bleeding Fool, who did a book on the Whisper Network, which is, it's a collection of the weirdos in the comic book industry who would rather get people out of the industry and talk behind the scenes and keep control of the industry, which they absolutely do have control. So it's, who's it? Gail Simone and I forget this other lady's, the red-haired lady, I forget her name, drawing a blank, son of a bitch, who said, she does this interview where she says, if you don't like my politics, don't buy my comics. And then there's a couple years later, there's an interview with her saying, yeah, the comic book industry is in deep shit. What did you think was going to happen? So the Bleeding Fool writer is writing this book, and I guess Mark Waid thought it was about that. Where he was, the punchline is Millar was talking about a different book, but Mark Waid immediately loses his mind and accuses Mark Millar of attacking Gail Simone. She's that 300-pound lady who tried to start a YouTube channel, and she put out like 5 videos. She didn't realize, like, oh yeah, it actually requires a little bit of effort. Pretty much, every other day at least you got to put out a video, and she was not on board with that. So the book is written by Penny Parker from the Whisper Network, and he thought it was that, and Mark Waid got on Facebook and lost his freaking mind. So Waid says, and he thinks he's referring to the Whisper Network book from Bleeding Fool, the more I think about this, the angrier I get at Millar. First of all, I doubt the book will ever be published. If Gail or Kelly Sue DeConnick wants to justifiably sue to stop it, their GoFundMe would cancel the national debt. Secondly, by publisher, I assume she means some Comicsgate dudes, or else she'd give a name. I told you, he's not in his right mind. This is a guy who's a well-known comic book writer, and even the stuff that people said he wrote well, like he wrote some Archie comic that was a World War II stuff, and I read that, I'm like, this is just war propaganda from Waid's bizarro point of view. So he goes onto Facebook and he has this bizarre, the thing is with all these people, whether Twitter, Facebook, or whatever, there's no point, they're in an echo chamber because there's no point in engaging with these people or even liking the wrong tweets because they'll simply block you. So they stay in an echo chamber because you get the chance to engage with them once, and next thing you know, you're blocked. And they run blockchains, like if you follow EVS or Richard Meyer back when he's on Twitter, or Bleeding Fool or Bounding into Comics, they just run blockchains associated with anyone who follows that. So, they have like, hundreds of thousands of followers across all these accounts, and they're all blocked. And then you go to some comic book writer or artist, and you see you're blocked. Like, why the hell would I support you? And, they don't. So, which is where the industry is, or it is now. So, he has this Facebook thing where a superstar whose heat is fading, Mark Millar, who's very successful, cry for it. Mark Waid is a guy who tried to interfere with Antarctic Press and Richard Meyer by getting them to cancel his comic book. I mean, the dude's out of his fudging mind. So he says, attention by blaming the industry, his peers, and the audience, rather than taking stock of his own professional progress, admitting that we're often the authors of our own fate, and finding the courage to reinvent himself to stay relevant. It's really not that hard. My star is not going to burn forever. Yeah, I think it's went out when you started to interfere with that. So he thinks he's referring to the Penny Parker Whisper Network comic instead of sitting back and waiting and find out what's going on, or maybe just not even comment at all. But he can't do that. He has to involve himself. It's like you would think you'd learn your lesson from the Antarctic press and having to settle with Myers. And then he did another thing where, oh God, who's there? I think there's a YouTube guy called Some Black Guy or something who talks about pop culture. And he had some YouTube video, and Mark Waid, and this is after the Antarctic press thing, Mark Waid comes out and calls him some alt-right Hugo Boss type. And the channel name is like Some Black Guy. It's like he's a POC and he's BLT. And somebody brought that up to Mark Waid. He's like, oh, okay. Well, he's an honorary, Hugo Boss. I mean, they think like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin are also Hugo Boss because they're insane. They're just out of their effing mind. They've been in an echo chamber for a long, long time. So people on Facebook start to question him about it, but they have to do it very carefully, otherwise he'll just block him. And the only thing he's able to come up with, eventually it comes up with it, he thinks he's referring to Mark Millar, but Mark Millar is not referring to Penny Parker, so Mark Waid, another, just a mental case, right? And then he responds like, well, why would Mark Millar do this? And he says, well, money and attention are not the same thing, and one does not automatically buy the other. He's implying, I don't know, I'm not a writer like these guys, is that Mark Millar is wealthy, but he needs attention. And, yes, that's true in theory, but that's not the case here. Mark Millar seems to just be having a good time. And no, they can't push back on it because they just get blocked. And then this guy points out classic Marvel error. I have a Facebook account. I have a couple. I don't use it. So he goes, there's some things that can't be agreed with, but clearly there's a disconnect between the big two's editorial, local comic book owners, shop owners, readers, and Mark is not wrong to highlight that. More quality storytelling is needed. And that sentence is doing a lot of work. I interpret that as, woke, feminist, anti-white propaganda is going to have to be shown the door. And like I said, that's just not going to happen. They would much rather just shrink the industry. So there's a reason why in the old days, you guys made a mark that still wows a reader to this day. And the thing is, once you kind of go down the rabbit hole, you look at older writing and you realize, it's not really how I remember it. So Mark Waid says, all these complaints about how comics are dying, again, that's objectively true. Comic book stores are closing and have been closing for years because of woke propaganda, because familiar characters are being written out of character. That's a valid complaint. When you change the character, one, you race swap them, or two, if you write them out of character, then it's not the same character. You build a foundation for 40 years, 50 years for these characters, and then you wipe it away in an instant and you expect the audience to go along with you. Why would they? When you turn Peter Parker into some slack-jawed soy boy. Almost said it. I really need to, there's some words I need to say. And the authors, the 300-pound obese panty-sniffing soy boys like Mark Waid, self-insert their own political causes like he does, or, Trump's Rangers syndrome, return them to SJW mouthpieces and not one single legitimate example given. Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder, okay. Iceman? Did you include Iceman? Nightwing, Harley Quinn. But, half of those, Captain America, well, there's a good example right there with Ta-Nehisi Coates. And then I think he addresses that and says, well, he only wrote it for like 2 years or something. And yeah, but it was horrible. I mean, you destroyed the character when that Captain America issue with the run series for like 2 years with Ta-Nehisi Coates was the real threat to America, thinks Ta-Nehisi Coates, is a bunch of blonde people in Idaho who I guess are growing corn or potatoes or something, who have, I guess, militias, and it's all the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, red-haired, green-eyed people in that part of the country who are the real danger to America in Ta-Nehisi Coates' mind. So Captain America, blonde-haired, blue-eyed himself, is fighting all these other blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, and you look at it and you're like, this is just insane. Oh yeah, Superman fought the Kathleen Kennedy Club, Like, when was that comic? 60 years ago? 70 years ago? How is that relevant to today? It just is, okay? That was like 60 years ago, dude. How well did, objectively, friends, Romans, countrymen, 300-pound panty-sniffing soy boys like Mark Waid, and 400-pound cat ladies like the other ladies in the industry. Objectively, how well is your stuff selling? It's just not selling. It's like, yeah, I can be a little bit of a jerk in how I say it, but like what I'm saying is not wrong. You know that. You know it's not selling. You know you have a problem because you have to put your left-wing politics into everything, and you don't see them as left-wing, toxic, anti-white, anti-Christian, anti-family, anti-nation behavior because you've been in an echo chamber for so long where even EVS had to be kicked out of an industry because he's vaguely right-wing. Vaguely, more like, to me, he's not right-wing. He's just a milquetoast, middle of the bell curve, Trump level kind of normie. But to you guys, he's Hugo Boss. Really? Can you provide any evidence of that? Or Myers, or all these other people in the industry? It's like, I'm not seeing it. I mean, it'd be cool if they were, Comics would probably be a whole lot funner. I mean, it wouldn't be allowed on YouTube for long. And that's the other thing is like these people, these left-wing, the left-wing has changed so much in my lifetime. At one time, they would have supported the small independent group of mostly normies. Like I would say they're more libertarian, liberal. Some are vaguely right-wing, doing an independent, selling comics through a network that they built themselves. All thanks to one Richard C. Meyer, 7 years ago. Like you would think the left would support that against these big billion-dollar DC and Marvel, and you look at them and go, "Oh no," because they don't have the right politics. Okay, so you guys are all just puppets for the machine. You're just raging for the machine. Yeah, they're absolutely on board with that. Anyway, there's no point in talking to these people because they just block it. Mark Millar seems to be the only guy who is willing to have kind of a fun conversation and talk to people in CG. And Mark Waid, let me get to his quote where he says it burns it down. Okay, so he says, I think a lot of us would rather see the industry burn down than get together with the alt-right. I don't know why you're using scare quotes for that. Who he considers like people in Comicsgate, like EVS and Myers and whoever. I know I would. Sorry. And I call BS, and anyone who tries to highlight the issues get piled on. I think it's far more accurate to say anyone who wants to blame everything on SJWs gets piled on. Okay, your comics aren't selling because of the SJW themes. And you're not going to change that. You're not going to get away with that. So the mainstream comics industry has been dead for a while. Thus the rise of Comicsgate. It's only possible because the mainstream is so bad. Anyway, these people are all legitimately mentally ill. Check out Comicsgate. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys all next episode.